most of the art world. Oh, like most of the art world, unfortunately, it tends to still be predominantly run by men, and white men at that, which is grossly disappointing and really boring. But it also makes, funding, like it is everywhere, quite difficult. So I, like many of my fellow fantastic women artists who are at the Chateau, saved and struggled, and it took me over a year to save money, working a myriad of side hustles, as well as fundraising, as well as trying to sell work and taking on every job. So it was a huge thing for me to get there. And as these women learn about me, I'm a bit of a workaholic, but also art is my world. It's the thing that's kept my head above water when other things didn't. It's the one thing that helps me make sense of the world, and has always been an inspiration. So I have made art. I can't remember when I didn't make art. And I grew up in a tiny little, not even a town in South Australia. So I grew up making art and running around in nature. And those two things are still my biggest love and biggest inspiration. So Kristine showed you a couple of white works that I worked on. So I have a history, like I said, my background's couture and costume, but I do a lot of textile based art. So I'll get out of that. I started doing a lot of work where I was fabricating, this is all silk, fabricating silk and making works which were inhabitable sculptures, but also existed off the body as well. I work a lot with performers. These are two dear friends of mine, Ben and James, who are incredible artists in their own right, and I still work with them today. So this was one of the first works that I did, which was back in 2017, in which I was fabricating silk. Both of the
Anastasia, can you do me a favor? Can you share your screen?
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I'd done that. My bad. Let me get off this. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to I've got 20 million things up in the background as well that I really want to close down before I share my screen. Okay, there we go. Okay, let me bring this back up. I think it's on this one. Yes. Okay. So these works.
Still not.
Is it sharing now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
these works are out of silk, and both of them begin as 20 meters of silk, and then I hand fabricate them. And it takes an insane amount of time to do. So that was the starting point for the works that I ended up, the major works that I ended up doing for when we went to the Chateau. And so that was the starting point. And then at the Chateau, I created the works. I used something called Tyvek, which is actually an industrial fabric. And there was this amazing tree, which I named the lightning tree. You can see that here. And it had been hit by lightning apparently 3 times. And at the time I left Australia on Christmas Day in 2019. And just after I left, we have a terrible bushfire season, like you guys get in California, but it was actually one of the most horrific bushfire seasons that Australia has ever seen. So it was quite a strange and surreal experience for me. I spent maybe 10 days in England before I came to France. And during that time, from very soon after I left, I was just seeing through all my friends' posts and through news in Australia that there were just insane hectares and hectares and hectares of beautiful native forest and people's homes. Just it was crazy. It was an inferno. I don't know. There wasn't a lot of international coverage initially when it was happening, but it was beyond anything that Australia's ever had, and we regularly have bushfire seasons. So when I got to the chateau and went for my first walk, I found this tree, and it was just this strange thread that seemed to connect me back to what was happening. And it was very confronting for me because I was, off on this adventure, and everyone at home was facing this, horrific experience. And I initially sort of harbored quite a lot of guilt about the fact that I was overseas and I was, on this adventure and making this work while that was all going on. But this tree, this amazing, beautiful tree kind of tied me back to it. And so I spent, the first few weeks fabricating all this fabric and installed it within the chateau, first of all, in the room that you saw from the photo that Kristine showed you. And then I installed it in this tree that sat on the island. So the chateau was back towards where these sticks in the foreground are. And I could see this tree from the window of my studio, and you walked out the front door and it was there. And I fabricated approximately 40 meters of fabric, and then I installed it, and Kristine was amazing and came out and helped me install it. And so a lot of my practice is actually quite experimental. I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm going to do until I start doing it. And I love the idea of working in scenarios where I don't really have control. So once something goes into a space, it starts to do its own thing. So obviously working in environment, that's that's something where there's very little control. And so the fabric was installed into the tree, and the beautiful thing about it was we'd have really frosty mornings and I'd go for a walk really early, and all of these ice crystals would form, and then they would slowly melt over the day, and it would constantly change and the light would change. And at times, like in this section, sunlight would catch in certain sections and glow. And that was an amazing thing. The other thing I did was take one of the silk garments that you guys just saw before that Ben and James performed in, and I installed her as sort of a sentinel in the back forest that was behind the chateau, which not that many people went, and it was less for it to be seen by anyone else and more to be a gift to the experience and to the forest. And this was it after it had rained. So when the silk gets wet, it becomes transparent. And the idea was that it would be left there after I went, and being silk, it would obviously have the potential to grow moss and slowly decay. And so that is her in the forest. Kristine and a few other people came up with me and helped me bind sticks together, and that was all done also with rope. So eventually the whole thing will just collapse and return to the forest. Art's a bit of a gift, so it's nice to be able to pass that gift on. There's some more photos of her. And then, because I'm a bit of a lunatic and doing one main project is never enough, I then also did the first of what has ended up becoming a series of red rope works, and the work that I've got over in Michigan at Bay College at the moment is a tiny little iteration of that. I found these 2 chairs in the orchard, in a collapsed old building in the orchard, and I claimed them, and I tied, knotted and knotted and knotted rope over the sort of final week and a half, I think it was, at the Chateau. We were there for a month, so the first work took me about 2.5 weeks in total to fabricate and get done. And then I knotted and knotted and knotted these rope, and I placed these chairs in a cellar. And you can see here with this one, there's I guess an idea of both it being like a tree root, but also how that ties back to being like veins, and installed it in the cellar underneath the chateau. And the interesting thing was, after I installed the work, I had a little torch and told people they could go down and look at it, but only 2 people at a time could go down. And I had placed the chairs 1.5 meters apart, and that was just a nominal amount, a distance that looked good. But the strange thing is, when I got back to Australia and then COVID hit, what we were all told is we were, obviously we were isolated and we had to keep 1.5 meters apart to be safe. And Australia went into a really hard lockdown, and Melbourne in particular. We had a very different response to COVID, a very hard response to COVID, which has proven to be very fortunate for us, because we don't have the kind of cases that are happening in the States or in Europe, fortunately. But it was a really interesting thing, because the work was entitled Conversations, and it was about, I guess, creating a space in which anyone could project themselves into it. And that was the idea of the chairs and what they represented. And depending on the light in the cellar at a particular time, that mood would change. And so they have since become, I guess, a little bit of a medium for me to continue that work. And those chairs are actually still there at the Chateau, because I can't actually afford to get them back to Australia, unfortunately, which is a bit of a bummer. But so I found some more chairs, and I've started doing work with 2 of my collaborators, Michele, who's a sound artist, and another friend, Lucy, who's a really amazing cinematographer. And we began working and working with this idea further, and placing the chairs into an environment. And we were doing the collaboration, and then Melbourne had Victoria had a COVID breakout, and we had a really hard lockdown, and I was living 2.5 hours out of Melbourne, and they were living in Melbourne, and we couldn't actually get together to collaborate. So the majority of the development of that work all happened with us in very, very different places. And this little work that is here is the video work that is in Michigan at the moment. So it's really exciting for me and also for them. And they wanted to thank you, Kristine, so much, to be able to have that work being shown, because it is about isolation, but it's also about how people can communicate ideas and work across that. And it's been a really amazing thing, because these were people who I was used to being able to access all the time, and suddenly moving away, and it's quite amazing. And we've since continued that project and been doing developing that further. And I've been a bit slack and haven't got, like I said, got together those other images. But this is my website, guys, so go and have a little lurk around it, and you'll be able to find more imagery, and you'll be able to find the link to my Instagram, which has got all the latest stuff that we've been doing, and also with my friend Ben, who, like I said, is an amazing dancer and physical performer. So yeah, that's me, and that's where I'm at, and that's what I do.
Thank you, Anastasia. That was
Oh,
wonderful.
mm.
And I just want to say we are honored to have the work in the gallery. It looks just
Oh,
beautiful. So
thank
thank
you.
you so much. So what I
I'm
will do next is we'll move to Arushi, and then we will do a little Q&A after that. So first, before that, I'm going to get through here. Let me see. I want to make sure you can see my screen. So,
Kathleen.
oh, so here's the end of Anastasia putting in her work. So here, I'd like to introduce you to Arushi Guranani, I'm sorry, is a multimedia artist currently living in India with a philosophy rooted in the importance of time and space. Let me see, dematerialization and transience. She explores materials across video, painting, and conceptual installations. Having grown up on a farm with nature, her multi-hued splendor, constantly changing, growing, evolving, magical, she seeks out the quality of impermanence in life and in materials that she works with. Her work embraces several mediums and seeks to highlight concepts of olfaction, minimalism, and spatial tension to inform the senses. Central themes to her research and investigation also include ideas of ephemerality, journey, the invisible, and the immaterial, to rationalize the inevitable nature of temporariness. She questions the relevance of olfaction in the visual contemporary art world. Material complicity in process-based practice is crucial to her work. She exploits camphor as a medium in different ways till it sublimates and disappears. So this is Arushi, and this first image is our first studio artist visits. And you can see that Arushi did a lot of walking around the chateau and finding these incredible bits of plants and just really observing nature that we had at the chateau and placing them almost out in a scientific type of nature. And then this right here is the installation in her studio that she had for the second studio visit. And it was a beautiful, absolutely ephemeral installation. Here's another close-up. And Arushi can talk about that a little bit more, but the great thing was that being with these groups of women, with this group of women in particular, we were able to really come together, and we bonded so incredibly quickly. And we shared materials and ideas, and you can see here, this is a material that Anastasia was using for her sculptural work, and Arushi just started to tear it apart and just started to investigate what that material did. And so this is the last image that I have of her in my PowerPoint, but I'd like to welcome Arushi, and I'm going to stop sharing. And Arushi, you can share your screen too if you'd like. Welcome. Arushi, you're muted. Let me see. I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah, I think we're good now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Great, thank you. Oh, thank you for that introduction, Kristine. But before I talk about myself, I really, really want to acknowledge you and everyone else, and Kathleen, Cecilia, Anastasia, that I can see you here. Oh my goodness, it's unreal. But really, the way Kristine brought us all together with not just her intelligence, but her sensitivity is just amazing. Thank you so much, Kristine. Uh, okay, let me share my screen. Give me a second. I hate talking about my work. Here you go. Can you see it?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, great. So this is my work. I'll start with this piece that I submitted for this exhibition. It's called "What is not smelling is not unsmelling." It's a bit of a paradox here, but this is not what I made at the Chateau. I will be sharing what I did at the Chateau as well later in the presentation. But this one is. Um, I will talk about my interest in smell and olfactory works here. And it sparked again after COVID because one of the first symptoms of COVID is loss of smell. And I was very interested in seeing how, in a virtual setting, for example, how would one smell my work? And so I've been very curious to explore that. And this is my first time actually seeing, so I'm excited for the reactions. So I'll start by explaining what my material is. I use camphor. I'm not sure a lot of you would be familiar with it, but growing up, it was a very daily thing that I saw in most Indian houses, not just Indian, Asian households. It's a little white, flammable, strong terpenoid that grows in the camphor laurel tree throughout Asia. And so a lot of people have it burning in the house. It's used for cleansing rituals, Ayurvedic herbal medication, things like that. You'd find it in cosmetics and hospitals, and without knowing that it's actually camphor, but you'd see it everywhere. So for me, it was a very daily thing. But it has a very special chemical property to sublimate into thin air on contact with heat. So that's where it captured both my interest in smell as well as dematerialization, and sort of got them together, and I started making ephemeral sculptures out of it. This is what it looks like. It on contact with these tablets, I manipulate them, and on contact with heat, they turn into these crystal-like, glass-like shards, and that sublimate eventually. And even this doesn't last forever. It takes about a week for this installation, and then it's gone. So that's how it started. But after COVID, it was like, even for all of you right now, this work is very different if as against when you were in a room with it, because the first thing you would notice is the smell, but here you just don't smell it. And so that's why the title, "What is not smelling is not unsmelling," because it is actually smelling, and it's a more commemorative place with this material. But my interest in smell started with the fact that philosophers going way back to Plato and Aristotle have regarded it as the lowest sense, almost pretty much. Anything that does not serve the eyes or the visual is not regarded as the best. So smell is usually categorized into these two binaries, which is either foul smell, stench, ugly, or on the other hand, it is pigeonholed in this thing of scent branding and fragrance and beauty. So there is no in between. There is no smell vocabulary that we have as such. It's either good or bad, ugly or beautiful. So for me to be able to explore this material, camphor, which is neither bad nor good, it's just not valued in the same way, say, a visual line, texture, color would be valued. So I'm still exploring how to talk about it, even because there are no words. There is very limited vocabulary. So that's interesting for me. These things that you see here, these crystallized things, they're very microscopic. So I make small sculptures, but scattered around, and they're scattered around in the room. So when you enter, it's just this obscure fragrance, which doesn't even smell like the camphor tablets anymore because of how it's been grounded. And it's magical really how the chemical properties change. And that's what I'm trying to explore here. Unfortunately, I couldn't do this at the Chateau because I didn't have the material with me, but I'll talk about what I did there later. Anyway, camphor is also antibacterial, antifungal, it's anti-mutating, it's used in insecticides and pesticides and for so many things. And after the whole COVID shebang happened, I would get WhatsApp messages and Facebook updates of how we should place camphor tablets in our, bedside and this and that to get rid of the virus and whatnot. This was a whole thing that happened in India. So for me, it was even more exciting about as how this particular thing, which has such a strong smell, first of all, we don't recognize the smell, but now we're using it for these things, which may or may not even be true. We don't know if camphor kills COVID. It doesn't. But it's just interesting how this whole thing happened in India. So I'll show you a quick little clip of how this works. I don't have a lot of behind the scenes, but if you see, that's how it sort of crystallizes over a period of an hour or two. This is a super, super fast time-lapsed clip. But essentially what happens is that when these crystals are forming, as soon as heat touches or comes in close contact with the camphor, the smell starts to emanate as well. So these crystals form and then the smell envelopes the entire room, and that's my work for me. I really just aspire for the viewer to smell my work and to experience that change as it's happening, which eventually will just sublimate and completely disappear. So this was just a little behind the scenes snippet of what happens before they turn into these. And I deliberately shy away from making any specific shapes. So I call these topographical geometric sculptures, which on one side are very undulating and they're like a mountain or a pyramid, but on the other side, they're extremely, extremely geometric and precise. And on top of it is this visualization happening, which is just, it's extremely time-based and it just falls apart really quickly. So that's the crux of my work, actually, the invisible components of smell and heat from this work. So really there's not, according to me, there isn't much to look at as such, but yeah, it's the smell and the heat. So hopefully those of you who can actually go to Bay College and look at the works, that would be great. I have camphor tablets over there. Kristine helped me lay them out, so that would be nice. Yeah, these are the crystals. They're extremely, extremely fragile. It's a very beautiful piece of work, I would say, in terms of preserving these crystals. Sometimes they do last because the heat sort of brings, it acts like glue as well sometimes. So it's no two sculptures are the same. They're ephemeral, they disappear, they work with time, heat, etc., etc. Again, a little bit behind the scenes. These are heat lamps that I use. You can see some camphor jumps over onto the lamp and sort of hangs on and also crystallizes it. So actually, I've been working on creating these camphor crystals all across my studio, not just on the surface of the camphor, but on different things, and to see how permanent surfaces like metal or this lamp, for example, or tree would react to this sublimating camphor. So that's the next steps of my practice, which has really the interest sparked again after COVID. So I'm really, actually, it's a very interesting time with the whole of last year. Everyone was talking about loss of smell, and for me, it was like, really, smell is actually one of the most important senses for the subconscious mind. It's where the limbic system is. It's where our memories are stored. It's where a lot of our subconscious thinking happens. So if you actually think of removing the sense of smell from your body, your experience of the world would change completely. So for me, it's very important as well. And yeah, and now I want to take this work forward even more. But coming to what I did at the Chateau, like Kristine said, I stole some of Anastasia's Tyvek and just literally snatched it apart, and again created these also ephemeral sculptures. So I couldn't carry them anywhere after our residency. They were just sort of swept up in the bin. And yeah, it just also talks about dematerialization, has notions of fragility and vulnerability, and how this Tyvek, which is actually a very, very sturdy material used for construction and house wrapping and to preserve huge buildings, that was just snatched apart. And that I had no idea what would come out of it. But when I saw these really extremely fragile little cotton fibers, as I call them, I was mildly surprised as how it they kind of protect buildings from rain and whatnot. So for me, that was very interesting. And this is what I ended up with at the Chateau. This was my studio. I set up a little gallery setting for all of the other women to see. And this is what it looked like at different times of the day. It was very interesting to photograph it. Uh, Another great thing that happened to me was this photo shoot. Lorelei, beautiful, beautiful model. She came quietly and interacted with my work, and it was just amazing to see how this the vulnerability of this material with the vulnerability of a human female body come together. And this was all her actually. I think this is the most interesting my work has ever looked because of her. I'm thankful. Um, and yeah, another little side thing that happened, not side thing, but a fun little thing I did on my walks was I found blue string at the Chateau. And by the way, that's Anastasia's Tyvek lightning tree lady. And so I thought it was the perfect spot for my work. And I hung this blue string on these trees in the shape of the word was, WAS, because this word does form the crux of a lot of my work, that everything was, and anything that is happening or will happen happens on the foundation that the past created. So it's just a little word play, not word play, but it's just a little idea that I like to incorporate with different materials that I work with. So this was special only because of the time and the space and the Chateau and all the ladies coming together, and the fact that I had Anastasia's Tyvek. So it was again more of a commemorative piece rather than anything else. There's nothing visuals to it as such. Plus, it's also all in nature. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if the strings are still there, what happened when it snowed. I have no idea. So it's just there hanging around with the lightning tree, and I'm happy for it. Another aspect of this waltz is the camphor tablets. I actually placed a dear friend helped me with this actually to burn a bunch of camphor, and it was massive. The fires were huge, and this was really something. I haven't put pictures of the fire. They're actually a bit dauntingly scary. So the idea was to have this camphor burning, and then without any trace of ash or water vapor, it just completely disappeared into thin air. And what is left here is just the marks on the cement because of the cement. If it was anything else, we wouldn't even see this wall. So this is actually just a piece of me that I like to scatter here and there wherever I go, to remind myself actually of everything that was and of the temporariness of time as such. So I think I've talked a lot about a few different aspects of my work, but when it comes down to it, my interests lie in dematerialization, ephemerality, things that don't last, time, space, specific spaces, site-specific works, but also smell. And smell is one sense which is ephemeral. Olfaction is something um, which can't be recorded as such. I mean, there's perfume, but again, it sort of falls into those two binaries of it being either really beautiful and fragrant or really foul and ugly. So uh, that's that's what I've been exploring right now, and I'll show you another piece of the close-up of these camphor crystals. And yeah, again, like I said, it's really about the underlying notions of hope and fragility and vulnerability, and they soon disappear. On first glance, even to me, sometimes it feels like glass or ice. But if you look at it carefully, icicles are always in one direction. If they start forming from top, they'll always fall down or to the side. These just, crisscross thing happening is very interesting to me. So I'm still in process of exploring more of this material, and I hope to. I don't know what I want next with it, but yeah, I really wanted to send the Tyvek works that I did at the Chateau for this exhibition, but I also really wanted to take this smell thing forward, and so here it is, camphor. Um, there's a little video, the whole, it's a 3-4 minute video that I sent for the exhibit, but I have a snippet of it here. I won't play sound because I don't think it'll be audible. But yeah, essentially, um, this is what it is. Just it's again with works like smell-based works. The whole thing is about documentation, and with this virtual setting, even the main material smell it goes away. Your experience of this right now on video is pretty much half of what I had first aimed for it to be. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and that's what's happening, and that's it. Thank you for listening to me. If you want to see my works, here's my website and my Instagram. Please slide into my DMs for a chat. Welcome. Yeah, that's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rushi. That was wonderful. That was great. Oh, I just
Thank you.
love that. Okay, the next artist that I have to that I am excited to share with all of you. Let me get my screen up, share my screen. Is Cecilia Ivy Price, and this is a photograph of Cecilia in her studio, and this is during our open studios. It was a great open studio. I loved going into Cecilia's studio because it was jam-packed with everything. Like, there were things I was just like, where did this come from? It was amazing. And she had so many, again, she looked around at the Chateau and found things in nature there and brought them into her studio. And she had them all placed out. It was incredible. Her studio was just like vibrant, just booming with things. So Cecilia Ivy Price was born in Buffalo in 1986. She began studying painting at first at the nearby Niagara County Community College. And after moving to Fredonia in 2013, she deepened her studies in drawing and painting at SUNY Fredonia State with the Cuban America painter Alberto Rey. In particular, she devoted herself to Gothic and figurative painting. In 2015, after graduating with honors cum laude from SUNY Fredonia, she began to work with adults with disabilities as well as the elderly to create artworks as an art facilitator. Solo exhibitions include Negative Space Gallery, Cleveland, Ohio, 2019, Dark Delights Faux Pas Gallery, Rochelle, Illinois, 2018, Recherche Octagon Gallery, Westfield, New York, 2018, Eclectic Selection, Sensory Winery, Ripley, New York, 2016, Transitions Pulp, 716, Lockport, New York, Dangerous State University, State University of New York, Fredonia, Rockefeller Center, 2014, and Rock for Hope, Lockport, New York. She has also traveled to the UK to lecture about her work at the Skeleton Stories and Social Bodies exhibit of 2018. Her paintings have graced the book covers of writer Jesse Follman's Protostar, An Automatic Apocalypse, Volume 2, Pillars of the Kingdom, Volume 3, A Decadent Demigoddess, and The Bartenders of the Nexus Tavern. You can find more information at ceciliaivy.com. And here I'd like to welcome Cecilia. Take it away, Cecilia.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. It was such an awesome thing to be able to go to the residency and meet with all you wonderful, beautiful people. And I will get into that a little bit in my presentation. I focused a little bit more on my past artwork with this, so I'm kind of regretting that because now that I've seen everybody else's presentations, which I knew I would do. I was like, if I go last, I'm just going to judge everything that I did wrong.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. It's wonderful that you're here, and I'm glad that you're sharing all that you're sharing.
Well, thank you. I hope it, I mean, I think it all pertains. I think at the end, you kind of see it all makes sense, but let me share my screen. And okay. Can you see my screen? Because I can't tell.
Yes, we can.
Okay. This is just showing you one of my older pieces. This is the beginning of me at NCCC with one of my first self-portraits. I'm mostly an oil painter, so pretty much everything you see will be oil painting. This is my first personal series, which happened after my mother passed away. So this is all about my mom. It's called A Place at the Table. And so this is the place where she used to sit at the table in the dining room downstairs. And then this is, you know, her coffee mug. And she died from lung cancer. And oh, I didn't know that that was automatically going to change. But this is also kind of about my mom. And I did a lot of research on all the flowers and what their meanings are. And this is a still life. So these, all the flowers in the front are actual live flowers. And then there were 3 in the back to represent myself and my 2 best friends that were fake flowers. So as the other flowers died, these flowers would not. They were supposed to stand for like strength and, you know, that we would remain together and whatnot, which is ironic because I only talked to one of them now and the other one I have not talked to in years. And that's just more, it's a 4-panel series. So as it goes along, you see which ones die. And it is interesting which ones kind of flop and wither into nothing and which ones still kind of resemble the original flowers that they were. And then, so this is one of my first personal self-portrait series. And you can kind of see already how my skill is changing. And this is more kind of to do with body image issues and kind of dealing with being a bigger female and a brown female. And just kind of dealing with that in general and trying to find confidence. This is my senior show, which you'll see a better picture of that in a second. So that's 2015. And so this is kind of an installation piece in a sense, with this being the painting that I did, and you'll see that bigger in a second. But this is all to do with my mother and these things that I found and coming close to my mom after she passed away. So this is just all rummaging through the attic. I actually found her adoption paper was actually in here, and her Bible, and all these pieces. Like, I think my grandmother made like this quilt and this pillow. I've never seen them before, and so it was just interesting getting to learn more about my mother that way. And then in 2016, I did this painting called African, and it is about basically growing up being called a African and Oreo and mulatto and all kinds of other things. And so on the left side, you see kind of dealing with the idealized American version of myself, or European version of myself, where I would be lighter skinned, have straight hair, no freckles, things like that, wear makeup. And then on the right side, you see how I am naturally. You know, I don't have anything in my hair. It's not straightened. You see my freckles and my blemishes. You see my lips kind of as they are now, like they're a little bit thinner. So this one actually won a couple awards. So I'm quite proud of it. And I just sold it last year. So I think this is one of my more accomplished pieces. And then I don't know why it's going backwards. I apologize. I have a Mac. I'm not sure if that's a problem, but that's what I blame it on. So then speaking of women and empowerment, I actually had worked in this Women Create show that was at the Dyckman Young Gallery in Jamestown, New York. So I had, so I think 2 of my personal series were in this show, but this is one of the first times that I actually got to connect with other local artists and be at this show that it was jam-packed full of people. It was almost hard to breathe in there. And that's where I met, some other female artists that were truly awesome, and I still talk to and have gotten involved with and helped me along the way, including Deb Eck, who does like blockout poetry and lots of books and things like that. Nancy Nixon Ensign, who runs the gallery at the Patterson Library in Westfield, and Audrey Dowling, who is a ceramic artist. And they've all been instrumental on helping me grow as an artist. So I thought that was a big point in my career. And then this is a half finished slide. So I went to the Skeleton Stories and Social Bodies conference in the UK. And that was like one of the first times that I really felt like my work kind of really meant something. Having done so much like Gothic kind of depressing work, it was the first time that I felt like I had been validated when they actually asked me to come and talk about my work and have my work in the show there. And this is my abstract, basically what I wrote to get into that convention. And then this is the painting of my mother that you saw previously. That was actually because they had an art show along with the convention. And so this is my piece that went with me over there. And then one of my Vita y Morte series from before also went with me over there. So it was interesting to figure out how to take work with me abroad, and to be able to show this work and then also talk about my work, which if you're interested, you can see it on my YouTube channel, but I almost cry at one point. So I don't think it was the best. I think I did what I could at the time, because I think my mom had been gone for like 4 years. So it was kind of still fresh, but not terribly fresh. but then you've got all these like scientists and like, you know, like higher class people, I guess you would say, you know, as artists, we're kind of thought to be lower tier. So when you're around people like this, you kind of feel like you're, you know, the little worm on a big hook. But I mean, they were awesome, and it was definitely an experience for sure. And so at some point, I don't know when it started, but I started playing with lace, and it's been a few years. I'm not even sure. I don't even think these are all finished at the same time, but I do know that these wood panels I started when I was at Fredonia, because that's when I learned how to build panels. But these were kind of spray paint things that I started experimenting with lace. And that rolls into doing other things with lace, such as taking this mirror spray paint that I found at some point, spraying it on to glass. And if you look through the opposite side of where you spray it, you actually will see a reflection. So I started doing these pieces, which are terribly hard to photograph, that are supposed to kind of make you think about yourself, and then also about how, as Americans, we are expected to not look at nude figures. And so you're kind of seeing it through a veil, but also seeing yourself and thinking about yourself, and you know, like how you view yourself naked, how you view other people naked, and what does nudity mean to you, and things like that. So I've created a bunch of different pieces like that. I have a small series going, and then this is kind of an odd one out, but it's actually made with the mirror spray. That's like this grayish tone in here, but it's on paper, so it doesn't have quite the same reflective effect, but still playing with different materials and seeing how they work together. And then this is a piece that's actually called Pussy, but I changed it because depending on the audience, that might not be appropriate. But so this is a bronze piece I did when I was at Fredonia, and this is the close-up of it. And so it was a piece that I had wrapped in lace, and it's actually a sculpture that my mother had. This cat belonged to my mother. And so I wrapped it in lace and was able to cast it. And then with the help of a friend in Cleveland who was working at a metal foundry at the time, he helped me finish it so that I could actually show it. And then moving into, I can't remember what year I did this, but so when I was in Italy, rather, I was able to see this part of Masaccio's, if I'm saying that right, Masaccio's piece, which is below the Holy Trinity. It was more recently discovered that there was another part to it, which is a vanità, which is about mortality and how, you know, basically how short life is, and that we should live it to the fullest. And that's what my other pieces with skulls are referring to. And so this is the piece, my version of it, and then I translated the text here that is obviously in Italian to English. What I once was is that what you are now is, I'm not even going to try to finish that because I'm so flustered, but you could read it. So this was a big piece that was actually done on a door, an actual door frame. And then this is the casket from my mother's funeral, which I've been wanting to do for years and finally finished it to do because I was in the Big Day of the Dead celebration in Cleveland. So I worked on it to be able to have that as part of my altar there. And I should have included my altar, but I didn't think about that. And this one is actually an acrylic as opposed to oil because of the time frame I had to finish it. And then going to the Chateau and all the girl power involved with, you know, being there with all the women in France. And it was just such an incredible experience. and I had to raise some money to be able to afford to go. And these are a couple of things that I worked on. As Kristine said, my studio was actually chaos. I couldn't just pick one thing to work on, which sometimes is a problem because I just get, my brain is all over the place. I mean, you can kind of tell that now. I can't focus on one thing. So I started a bunch of different projects, and so what you see at the show is, this is 2 out of the 3 that I believe are there. And I called it Enflushment, and then included the technical definition of enflesh, to give like a flesh-like form to something. And so this is taking my playing with lace a little bit further and thinking about myself like being like through the veil in a sense, and also coincides with some medical issues I'm having, and thinking about what I consider to be like the female form, and if like certain things have to change, would I still see myself as being a woman if I may end up having a surgery to remove certain things. So I've been dealing with trying to figure that out and kind of putting that into my work. And the one on the right with the spider webs is more just me playing with spider webs because I like them. But also trying to see how I could do a similar idea. Although I don't think it's as successful as the lace one. I want to play with that more possibly and do a couple different versions of it. But I mean, that is kind of it. I think I want to say, I wanted to talk about also Enflushment as dealing with, like I was saying before about being a female of color, and how America sees you and your skin and what they automatically assume you are, and think about you and how they treat you. And I mean, it's affected every part of my career, from going to school at Case Western, which I don't even like saying I went there because of how I was treated, to how other artists have treated me, and just different random things you pick up being a female artist, and hearing really silly things like watercolors are only for women, it's a female medium, and weird stupid crap like that you hear. And it just, I don't know, I'm not even sure that has anything to do with this, but and then trying to fast forward to some of the things I'm currently working on. And sorry, that keeps rolling back. I think it's my mouse. So on the right, or the left, you see a print called Vitamin Art, and it has to do with how in America we are addicted to drugs. It's a pill bottle. I realize the pills are hard to see in the bottom there, but and it has to do with me trying to use art instead of drugs to help deal with some of my anxieties and depression and things like that. And then this is my Judith. I didn't have another picture of her that I could find quickly to throw in there. I am still working on it, as you can see. This is supposed to be Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she looks terrible. And I've gone over her face, I don't know how many times. You may or may not know who that is. If you don't, I'm not going to tell you, but I think you should be able to figure it out. If you don't, then I did not do my job. But that's just kind of how I feel about things right now. And if you're not familiar with the history behind this piece, Judith was originally done, Judith slaying Holofernes. Caravaggio did it, but then also Arteza Gentileschi also did her own version. And if you're not familiar with her, you should look her up because she is a very powerful female in the art world that you hear very little about, because at that time period, women couldn't paint. So a lot of her works were attributed to male artists. Also, there's a whole thing with a rape trial. And it's very interesting. And that is where I will stop. Thank you.
Cecilia, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So now I would like to open it up for comments or questions. You can unmute yourself, or you can put a comment or question in the chat. I don't know if any of the artists have questions for each other, or who might be visiting and watching right now that might have a question. No questions at all? We have a very quiet audience. I think that being the celebration of Women's History Month, I think that it is, oh, you can't unmute? Oh. Well, let me see. I will.
Okay, now it let me unmute.
Okay. Anastasia, can you? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. Did you have a question, Anastasia?
I've got a question for Arushi. I'm really interested because Arushi and I spoke a lot. She's obviously been much more eloquent and prepared in this whole scenario than I have. I just rambled for 20 minutes.
I'm winning awards.
But Arushi and I spoke a lot because I think although our work is materially quite different, I think we come from a very similar place, and our approach to our work. And I'm really interested, Arushi, in what you're doing. In the photo of the lamp where the canvases come on it, so is that just when it heats, it spits up and does that?
Yeah, it's actually one of those reptile lamps that you would see in a zoo, and it's very hot. It's made of porcelain, so it's not your regular lamp, and it gets very hot, but it slowly emanates heat. And so it's very funny how the material just attracts it. It's very slow. It's a very slow process. You won't see it happen. You cannot. Even if I do a time lapse of it, you will not see it happening, but it does. And yeah, it's quite fantastic. That's how heat works.
It's really interesting. I was thinking a lot about, it'd be interesting to see whether there are other materials that, because of their chemical composition or their makeup, would have a similar effect somehow, or and then how that would react. Like obviously when the camphor melts, and you've got all the olfactory in the same way that fabrics will slowly absorb moisture and absorb perspiration and absorb stuff. I'd be really interested to see what it would be like to put textile in your studio and see what that absorbs over a period of time.
That would be amazing. That would really truly
do
be amazing. Let's do it. I've started using wood. So there were trees being cut where I live. So I just stole a bunch of them, took them to my studio. There were some insect houses and whatnot. So I just let it be like that. I didn't clean it off. And I took them to my studio and I poured the camphor powder on it, let the lamps be. And although it's not as different as it is on a plinth, it's still, because wood isn't very tactile, it's not very soft. So it's still pretty rigid. But yeah, if you come into my studio with your fabrics, oh my God, that would be amazing.
We'll get
Let's
there.
do it.
when the world starts again, babe, and we're allowed to travel one day.
I know, right? I think I see us having a reunion as soon as the world opens up. I pretty much can guarantee that's going to happen. So I have a couple questions that I'm going to read. Janine, one of my students, her question is, Anastasia and Cecilia talked about how women have a struggle within the art world, and being a woman and really wanting to go out and express myself. What kind of treatment should I be prepared for? Any advice you could give me to an aspiring female artist?
Cecilia, do you want to speak first?
I can. I guess part of that depends on, and I don't want to belittle anything that maybe Kristine or Anastasia have gone through. If you're brown, it's going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to be hard nonetheless. It really depends on how you want to approach it, where you are, how people are in your area. There's so many different factors. But what I would say to be strong no matter what. It's so hard to prepare you for that. Just be aware it's going to happen, and don't let the bastards grind you down is one of my favorite things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can only double down on what Cecilia is saying in regard to what you should be prepared for. It's going to be no different than being a woman walking through any other part of the world. As Cecilia said, I'm by the luck of my parents' heritage, I'm white, so things are inordinately better for me than they are for women of color or trans women. And depending on where you are in the world will depend on your experience of things. But I mean, essentially the art world is the same as every other bit of the world. So I guess the piece of advice I can give to anyone, and that's regardless of someone's gender, is make art because you can't not. Don't make it because you can. If that's the reason you make art, I use, I'm very similar to Cecilia in that art making is the thing that is the reason why I'm still even walking on this planet. So it's something that I don't do if no one ever saw my art, I would be making it still. Showing work or having work in exhibition is not the driver for me behind my work. I'm considerably older than both Cecilia and Narushi. I turned 50 this year. So it's been a really long struggle. And I think it's a really long struggle for any artist. Unfortunately, more so for women. I mean, historically, Cecilia gave you one name of one amazing, woman artist who's not recognized. Just my advice is look into history, hunt, find women, both now, but also go back through the past. Do the work. Those women are out there. Their work is out there. Look for it, hunt for it, and use those women as your little beacons to keep making your work, and make work for yourself. Don't make it for others.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you. I have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to keep going too. So my student Laura has a question for Cecilia. You use very vibrant colors. What is your way of approaching color in your work?
Good question. Generally speaking, they are colors I actually see, and I just try to pull them out more. If you are familiar with the term local color, it's that a lot of times we have a tendency to see a red apple as only being red. But if you are a painter, you are you're basically trained to look and see the other colors that are in the apple. It's never just red. Nothing aside from man-made things, nothing is ever just one color. So you get trained to pull out more and more colors and see that red apple is actually having hints of yellows and greens and other things, and maybe it's got spots and stuff. So it's also trying not to make it overly perfect. I'm not sure if that's, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great, Cecilia. Thank you. So Alyssa, another student, have you noticed a difference in treatment of women in the art world in the time you've been an artist? Are you treated differently now than say 10 years ago? That's a general question to all.
I would say no, but
And I might comment on that a little bit, just saying 10 years,
yeah.
right? Just because I think for myself, if I reflect it back on myself, I see myself as different than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, what might have been happening to me might have put me down, but in 10 years time, I have become the femme de chien, right? Like we have the ability to become powerful and powerhouses, and finding a community of women that backs you and supports you. I think that's a huge thing. And so only do I see the shift exterior of me? Maybe not, but I see that within myself and learning and growing and making sure that I have strong females around me and or encourage women. I hope that that's what I do with my life, is that I hope that I lift women up, and that's what we can all do. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that.
The only other thing I'd like to expand on that is I work also within a very queer space. So, and we are working in collaboration. So one thing, and I can't speak for anywhere else in the world, but one thing in Australia that, I've definitely noticed is that there's always been a really strong community of queer artists, and I think that women have always had a big place in that as well. And in Australia, I've definitely seen that here there's been, at least in the cities, maybe not out in regions, but absolutely in the cities, there's much more. The world has moved forward, a great deal in that area. And I think that women in general too have I don't know, understand that it's absolutely about lifting up, and there's no benefit to individually having any of us reaching a goal if we're not lifting up those who need it most, and that's one thing. And I definitely think that you, at a certain point, you just get to a point that you just don't give a shit about what anyone thinks anymore. You just don't care. And I think that there's an enormous amount of freedom with that. I think as an artist, I don't know, well, I can only speak for myself, but I still have, deep imposter syndrome moments. I think a lot of artists have that. But I think there just becomes a point where I just actually don't have the time to give a shit about anyone else. I've got too much to do.
Anybody else want to comment on that? I do have more questions. So Hallie asked, Anastasia, I heard you say that you were an independent artist. I was wondering, Arushi and Cecilia, do you two do art full-time as well? If so, what's your individual path to being able to pursue art full-time?
I think first of all, I think it's safe to say that when Anastasia says that she's an independent artist, doesn't mean she's just a full-time artist, in the sense that there's a lot that goes behind in being able to make art. And I think it's true for all of us on the panel here. has art brought me money in the last 2 years? No. Has it brought me any money in the last 2 years? Also no. So I wouldn't explicitly call myself personally a full-time independent artist, but I would. And this is something that I learned at the residency in France from all these other women and from French people as well. I mean, it is what it is. If you are an independent full-time artist, that's what you are. And it just sort of resonates Anastasia's words of you've just got to stop thinking about defining yourself or stop thinking about what other people think. It's just make your work, do your work, get money. There are plenty of ways to get money. It's out there. There's so much money in this world. Just, yeah. I think, yeah, that's my answer. Cecilia, do you want to add?
I mean, I'm definitely not making a living off my art. Last year, I made, I think, $500. So I would say for anyone trying to be a full-time artist, don't. You need to be an artist first. You need to do what you need to do also to make money. And at some point, maybe those two will meet up. It may take a while though. And like, you know, Anastasia said, that can't be your whole goal, you know, because it might never happen. You don't know. It really depends.
Yeah, I just need to say being an independent artist does not mean that I'm making money. I live below the poverty line. I do though absolutely work the equivalent hours of a full-time job as an artist. I just also work another whole shit ton of hours doing whatever else is going to pay my bills and enable me to make art. Sometimes I'll get a sale and that's amazing. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to get a decent sale, but all that's doing is paying my rent and paying my bills and helping me make more art. You know, by independent, it means I'm not funded by anyone else. I'm not making art from a patron or from grants or from selling a shit ton of work. I'm self-funding, and often it's not coming from art.
But I think all of you do agree that you wouldn't choose a different way. You're artist.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, absolutely
So
not.
that's just,
And to me, being a full-time artist is not about that you're not doing anything else to support. It means that's your job, and you know that's my full-time job. Just like a myriad of other people have multiple jobs to, you know, achieve things, and someone else's goal might be money. My goal is art making, so I am, you know, all of the women that I met, they may support, you know, and including you, Kristine, you know, you may have another career as well, you know, or that's a side thing from your art making. But you know, all of these women are still full-time artists, and I think that worldwide, yeah, it's a common, it's just common world, you know, a common thing worldwide. Artists aren't paid well. They tend to not earn money, and even artists who are working and considered to be successful, if you actually look at what they're personally earning, it's not a great deal, you know. So yeah, I don't think that, yeah, the idea of by the word independent, I don't mean, you know, financially so.
but I do want to say that things are changing. I truly believe that things are changing. And so maybe not so quickly, but if you're an artist, you're an artist. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But don't be defeated by that. I don't want you to hear what we're saying and think that there aren't any options. Like I mean, if you're an artist, there isn't an option. You just make work because you have to. Like you couldn't exist without it. And so, but also believe in yourself and know that you can do, when you want to do something, you can absolutely do it. And there is, I believe that wholeheartedly. So I don't.
Absolutely, you know, absolutely. I want to really confirm what Kristine has just said, because not having a lot of money is not a reason to not be able to make art. You know, it's possible to make things. You might not be able to go out and buy that one specific material that, you know, is the dream thing in your head. I have a million projects that may or may not happen because of, you know, financial restrictions, but there's an amazing freedom also in, and creativity in accessing things and thinking differently. That's one great thing about, you know, not necessarily finding an easy way there. You actually often find a better way there. So don't let the fact that you can't go down to the art shop and buy that dream thing, go out and find another way to make the art that you want to do.
Yeah.
There's always a way.
Perfect creative problem solving. That's what we're good at. I'm glad a couple more questions that I want to make sure we get in. Anastasia, this is from Macy. Anastasia, Cecilia, and Arushi, what kind of things in everyday life inspire you to create something?
Everything and nothing.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, everything that is nature really inspires me, and everything that isn't nature does not inspire me at all. So yeah, grass, trees, sky.
That's so good.
Things that keep changing, things that aren't constant.
For me, I listen to a lot of music, and sometimes that helps. Although that's more of something I do while I'm working. I don't necessarily think that it makes me come up with new ideas, but sometimes I think it can. But nature is definitely a big, if you are lacking in ideas or motivation or whatever, go take a walk. I think that helps a lot.
Thank you. So our last question that I have here is from Jacinta, and Jacinta says, or asks, Anastasia, Cecilia, and Arushi, what are your most memorable response you had on your work?
Who wants to go?
I can, okay.
My one thing that I hope to get with people is to move them. I'm not actually that fussed whether someone likes my work or doesn't like my work. I hope that it might make them think potentially about things, particularly about humans and the environment. But mostly, I want to move people, and the best compliment I've received was a woman who came up to me, who I didn't realize she'd been following my work for a really long time. It was the first time she'd come and seen my work, and she told me that every time she looked at my work, it was so beautiful it made her cry. And if I don't care if it makes someone scream, I don't care what it is it does, but if it to have that's a stunning, beautiful, wonderful thing that someone sees something that you do and it makes them feel.
I would agree with that completely. I was trying to find the actual words because I know I will mess it up because I'm not nearly articulate. But when I did one of my conventions, I had to go away to go to an artist talk. And when I returned, there had been a couple that had came to my booth and seen my work. And they actually wrote me a letter, and I have it framed somewhere in a box still. but it says something along the lines of, thank you for creating this work and sharing your whole process. And, you know, art is such a cathartic thing. And it's great to see your work among all these, you know, more STEM related works. And, you know, it moved her to think about, I think her mother, somebody that she lost. And I mean, just even the fact that they took the time to stop and write that out, to me was just amazing, let alone the actual message that was there. It blew my mind. And I'm pretty sure it made me cry at that point. I mean, that's one of the things that keeps you going, you know, when you think, you know, wow, my work is shit, nobody likes it, I'm not selling, I'm not, you know, a millionaire right now, you know, nobody's walking around with a shirt with my artwork on it and stuff like that. But then you read something like that and you're like, okay, I got this. So, Arushi?
Oh, well, mine is not the best response I ever had, but it's the most memorable one for sure. I was in Singapore and we had a really small group and we were discussing some materials. And that was the first day. I had a bunch of camphor with me and I got it to show it to everyone. And a gentleman walks in and he just stops, he froze, fell to the ground and just says, what is that smell? That's the fragrance of death. And for a second, my heart skipped a beat. I was equal parts excited inside because someone acknowledged my material, but also terrified because I didn't know if I'd evoked a traumatic response or, you know, he said death like that and I got scared. But essentially, it was just that he was a Malaysian Muslim, and in their culture, they have embalming rites. When someone dies, they would use camphor and sandalwood to rub on their body for preservation and cleansing and healing. So yeah, and this is at the time when I was just getting started working with camphor. This is 2-3 years ago. So it stuck with me. It really truly became one of the most memorable things because I had never in a million years imagined someone would have that reaction. So that was that.
Wow, that's great. Those are great responses. We do have one comment from Kathleen. She wants everybody to know I always think of questions later. So now just want to send a big thank you to all you do for so generously sharing your art, your philosophies, and your beings. Kathleen was another artist with us at the residency, and she'll be talking, I think you're talking next Wednesday possibly, or Thursday. So, but that whole schedule is up there. So Kathleen, we can't wait to hear from you too.
Thank you for stopping
any other?
in.
What's that?
I was just thanking Kathleen for stopping in. I didn't know she was here.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else you'd like to add or say?
One thing I would like to add is I would like to thank Kristine for herding all the cats together and for putting all the work in and making this happen. We all sat outside a fire on a freezing cold night at the Chateau, and we spoke about, you know, seeing each other again and creating self-residencies. And Kristine said that she was going to, you know, she wanted to have this exhibition, and you know, we had all sorts of huge ideas, and then of course COVID happened, and yet despite everything, she's sent her beautiful self throughout not only, you know, America to gather us, but further afield, and made this happen. And I'm so honored and so grateful to you, Kristine, for that. You rock.
Thank you so much. You're gonna get me all choked up. And I love that you said herding cats. I was like, I did explain to somebody, I was like, yeah, it's not just herding cats, it's herding international cats. But I am honored. I'm honored to know all of you and to have had that incredible experience with you, to make art together, to break bread together, to toast and dream together. And I think it's only the beginning for us, my women. And I thank you so much for everything that you shared with my students and with other people that came to listen to the talks today. And I look forward, I hope you guys can kind of pop in on the other talks as well. I know you guys might not be able to in at the 1 a.m. hour, but please do if you can. I want to thank you all so very much. I am honored to have you in my life. And so it's only the beginning.
That's right.
It's so mutual. And so good to see you, beauties. So
I
good to see you.
Right, thank you. You guys were amazing.
Oh,
Thank you for speaking.
Inspiration.
Thank you.
Constant inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
yay. All right. I'm going to end this meeting. I'd like to thank everybody who attended outside of the artists, and thank you for all of your comments and questions. And love you guys.
Love you.
Love you guys.
You
And
guys
you.
take care.
this has been recorded, and so except for the beginning, I forgot. I got too excited. So once it's made accessible, we'll get that up and out there. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.